Hi everyone, I'm Lori and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today's video is entitled The Event, First Responders, Are You Prepared? Part 2. And this is a video in two parts. The first I put out the other day, and that was in support of wayshowers and first responders to have a checklist of what is required in the days ahead and the changes that are coming, to be able to understand what needs to be shored up in our spiritual mastery so we are self-sufficient and sovereign enough to help other people in their awakening to their light within. So the first video also focused on us changing our orientation in the understanding of ourselves as not just purely physical, but to expand it to the idea of us being a consciousness in energetic form. Because if we're moving to higher vibrations and frequencies and navigating new dimensions, it is essential to have an understanding of ourselves energetically so we can be aware of our boundaries and protect them, which is the subject of today's video, boundaries, their repair, and also maintaining them with our awareness. And all these videos are in transcript form, so you can work more closely with them on your own. And I've placed them on my website, which is called soulselfawareness.com. And I've listed the link down below in the description box. So you can just go to the website, and under the blog header, they're all listed there. You can just click on that and work with the transcripts themselves. I will now read this aloud, and I would appreciate if you could leave comments down below. I always love to see what you're thinking, and also if you would subscribe to my Lori Polina YouTube channel. Thank you. Okay, part 2, boundaries. Maintaining our personal boundaries are how we stay sound, healthy, and empowered. Our boundaries are a metaphor for our aura, the energetic immune system that keeps us functional, comfortable, and operating in the black so we can shine our light for others. Our aura is an oval-shaped energetic filter and shield that encompasses our entire body. This boundary is managed by our awareness from the crown chakra at the top of our heads. When we are healthy, we consciously patrol this field like a border to protect our inner sanctuary or safe space. Our crown chakra not only acts defensively towards outward threat, but also projects an outward signal of how we want to be seen and treated, much like a scent or a beacon. It is here that we begin to make the exodus from disempowerment to empowerment, for in many cases, especially in the case of sensitive, heart-centered people, we have protective shells that have been compromised. When we, as first responders, awaken to our source within and feel the call to love and light, we realize just how differently we are aligned than those around us. Our interior is passionate of fifth-dimensional vibrations, while our environment is steeped in lower shadow. Not only do we feel different from others, but are often victimized and swept away by abrasive behaviors from others that distort our self-worth and power and leave us broken. This is a common hurdle for a light worker, in that a requirement to be capable of leading others to the light within is having the gift of extreme sensitivity. This sensitivity must not cripple, but rather be guarded, knowing that you are enlightened to love, you are a vital grounding force on a mission, and you are keenly connected to Source. Once certain of your importance, You no longer take cues from those around you, but are directed from within by the inspiration from the God of your heart. And from this inner directive, you will be guided on your mission. Let us also remember to distinguish those who are truly inspired by our light from those who are not ready to begin their awakening, as the universe will tend to them according to divine right timing. We are not to do the heavy lifting. A very clear example of this initial compromising of our borders and boundaries is in the innocence and vulnerable light of a little child exposed to the overpowering behaviors of adults. While young, we are not confident in our understandings and often defer to adults who can be damaged themselves. In many cases, we don't realize what effect this has on us as we mature, causing us to remain uncertain, ashamed, and at times victimized. This is the case when our energetic boundaries are operating in adulthood on settings that were dialed down during childhood for reasons of survival, such as not expressing our needs, calling out bad behavior, or simply not being able to stand up to abuse. When functioning on these settings, we unwittingly place ourselves in harm's way and send out signals and respond in ways that attract the same abusive behaviors from those around us. If our protective settings are not updated as we evolve past these early childhood situations, we leave the old sign over the door, drawing more of the same unwanted behaviors from others. Instead of guarding the borders of our boundaries from our crown, where our authority could assure safety, we never venture up there to stand guard, but instead remain ineffectively stuck in the vulnerable emotional center of the second chakra or stomach, where we allowed those toxins from others in to dismantle our well-being. The distorting limitations and perceptions of our early programming is much like the example of an elephant. Chained in its infancy, it can grow to such strength as an adult to easily break that chain, but will never attempt it because of the unexamined and untested foundation of its initial reasoning. Listed below are some of the programs that can compromise our boundaries. Invalidation, physical and mental abuse, neglect, abandonment, over-nurturing, codependence, expectations of others, sexual identity, racism, trauma, success and failure, fear, trust, cultural, religious, and educational programming, performance standards, rejection, loss, ideals of beauty, health, and money, programming to hide our light, laughter, or our being unique. And this is to name just a few. If or when we reach a point in our life where we can no longer ignore these precarious settings of our boundaries or the crisis situations they create, we can choose to free ourselves from victimization and realize we are no longer disconnected from the power of our source within, the higher self, who can help us break that chain from childhood reasoning by simply committing to daily meditation. It is with this simple act of our will that we open a path from victimhood to empowerment. As we eventually develop a loving partnership with this immortal aspect of ourselves, our higher self, we finally gain clarity of who we really are, not a child, not a broken shell, not a victim, but a mortal aspect of our soul who has partially disconnected from its source. Choosing to reconnect to our higher self or source by daily meditation will lead us to self-heal. As we release pain and form a bond to our true self, we grow confident in our actual divinity and eventually assume the posturing of our greater persona and effectively protect it with a boundary. No longer assuming the posture of a frightened, uninformed child, you can begin to expand with practice to be connected and aligned to your heart, which is your divine essence, your original self. The mind can be misled, but the connection to your heart is eternal and cannot, if you look for it, for guidance. This is important because until you reestablish your true identity, you cannot be an effective light of love for others. If you take the time to really heal and remove the misperceptions or clouds that block your sun, the warmth of your light will return and be life-giving to all you encounter. So, how is this disconnection from our divinity formed, and how is the misperception of our self-worth being sustained? When overpowered as a child through various degrees of unconscious behavior or even abuse from others, we mistakenly believe the projections of the caregivers, siblings, teachers, relatives, etc., who were ironically victimized by others themselves, who may have intimidated us as children. Projections are a very convincing delivery system, usually coupled with anger, ridicule, sarcasm, blame, shame, etc., and are believable to someone unprepared to consider the source and their source. What is being projected from abusive people is the toxic energy from their own abuse. Whether these projections are onto an innocent child or that child grown to maturity, they are not truth. Not the truth of who you are, your higher self, an immortal, individualized ember of Source itself. If you can identify with who you really are and wield that from your knowing, you will not allow a breach of that boundary. And how you do that is knowing with certainty from your crown chakra that any projection that is not loving is false. This is the key. What you know to be a powerfully delivered falsehood is just a projection of the deliverer's own feelings of themselves. From there, it is for you to not allow that toxic message into your boundaries. For if you believe in any way, you will suffer the breach. In truth, unlike passing a hot potato, people who project their misery onto others never diminish their own pain and suffering. Now, let me just say here that if someone is in need of communicating their truth or requesting you to consider their point of view, you can accept that if it is lovingly or respectfully delivered. What I'm referring to as not being acceptable is abusive, unloving communication. When people communicate with love, they do not accuse, assume, or blame. They are speaking their truth from their heart for you to consider. We, as individual souls or embers of the original Creator, are given and sustained by our own personal dimension. Each soul's dimension is unique, and like a computer, functions similarly to others, but not the same. When we think, we can make assumptions based on how we function and what motivates us, which is often the case of projections from others, it leads to judgments that are unfounded and undeserved. When we are clear on the damaging nature of projections, we are eligible to assume the protector role of our own boundaries. To start, let us embrace the truth that we have never been worthy of being treated with abuse, blame, abandonment, invalidation, etc., but by their repeated reinforcement as children and then subsequently as adults, we become programmed to feel, think, and behave like a victim. From there, we can learn the difference between what is acceptable behavior and what is not. Here, I'm referring to healthy, life-affirming human interaction. Abuse stems from fear, while respect and kindness stem from love. When it is not loving, we have a reason and a right to walk away when abuse is happening. This includes refusing to accept the toxins of others' unloving statements or behaviors, believing their accusations have any validity or hold any truth about you. These upgrades in our self-worth and self-love all stem from the simple understanding that we are all connected to Source within, our heart's original identity. Once we are strong on this point, we will be capable in having the resolve to be tested multiple times, which is required for our newly laid boundaries to solidify. And then we must also consistently communicate our newfound standards to others who breach these boundaries. The more we work with the higher self in meditation, the more we will start feeling into its parental awareness and authority to lend its personal protection to our physical, mental, and emotional well-being. Here, armed with the certainty that we are now connected to our larger aspect, divine love, we are worthy to extend a more expansive comfort zone, knowing we can trust ourselves to clearly see and enforce our discernment of truth from falsehood. Once we can uphold our boundaries, when any breach does occur and we want to release the toxins it harbors, we can simply use the tools of feeling and imagination to restore our sanctuary. First, we can identify the toxic energy by feeling it, and then in meditation, using our visualizations, certainty, and breath to inhale into the pain and then release this energy on the exhale. This will restore our light and our well-being. For we first heal the spirit, and the spirit then heals the body. From there, we learn to work with others in loving and empowered ways to create new paths to freedom and fulfillment. We all have a right to protect our own well-being while honoring the rights of others. Creating a timeline that moves us towards a life of inner fulfillment and well-being is as simple as making choices that support these qualities within us. A metaphor to help understand how we create new timelines is the following example of an outgrown relationship. If we realize we are unhappy in a relationship and we can no longer abide in it, we would start to make choices to move away from that state of unhappiness. We might begin by first talking about it, then perhaps moving out, staying with a friend for a while, then moving to a different town or a job or a new relationship. After a year or two, in a completely new and better life, we can look back at that old relationship, knowing that our old partner is still alive and in the same place. We could, in theory, still be there now, but because we created a different timeline by making a series of better choices, we no longer live in that world. This is how we are moving to the timeline of a love-based planet from a world based on power abuses, self-service, and inequality. We can also move to a new timeline in relation to our individual inner needs, our happiness, and our empowered functioning by making better choices based on the new awareness of who we truly are, a heart-centered warrior, and upholding a sanctuary of awareness to protect it. So I hope that's helped. I will be putting out another video on healing the heart, which is the last in this way shower or first responder videos. And again, I'd love to hear your comments down below, and if you would subscribe to my Lori Polina YouTube channel. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next week with another video. And remember to breathe.